Welcome to toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and in today's video we're going to be trying to make some arms for a vintage Transformers G1 Huffer. Now this little mini-bot suffers from a very common problem, and that is the fact that his arms break off. His arms are designed to look like the smokestacks when he's in his car mode, and then you get these sort of silver arms when he is in robot mode. He's not the most amazing looking of the Transformers, but he's one that I know a lot of people like, and it's always a shame when you see them looking like this. So this poor chap here has both of his arms snapped off. And I've been enjoying recently making sort of parts for Transformers that are commonly broken just out of styrene sheets, and using my bag of scraps to see what I can make. And that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to see if we can make some replacement arms for this little Huffer and get him back up and displayable. So let's take a look at what needs doing, take him apart and see what we can make.
Personnel selected: Dave, toy restoration expert and YouTuber. Channel codename toy-polloi.
So here we go. This is a little G1 Huffer, and you can see this is what he's like in vehicle mode. He's a little truck, and his arms turn into these smokestacks which are chromed. Obviously the chrome does wear off over time, so you can see this one here, the chrome is fairly worn on this side, but that is what he should look like when you get an original one. He's a funny little vehicle. I can't say he's one of my favourites, but I know a lot of people like him. But the problem is that the way these arms are sort of attached, there's a very weak bit of plastic there, and they do tend to snap off, and so you often find him looking like this. So this is him in robot mode, and you see he doesn't have any arms. If we quickly transform him into the vehicle mode, which is just a case of pushing a few bits around like that, I think we're supposed to rotate his wheels up and in, you can see he now doesn't have his smokestacks on. So yeah, he's sort of not the greatest of vehicles if those pieces are missing, and I've thought for a while that it would be possible to make something to replace these. So today that's exactly what we're going to do. I always keep a bag of scraps, so every time I do a project using styrene sheet, I put any of the offcuts into this bag. So this is just sort of bits of styrene that look like they will be useful in future, and today we're going to use that bag to make some new arms and smokestacks for this little Huffer. I may make a few little modifications to it because I was never particularly that impressed with how his hands looked. You can see these are the bits that turn into his hands, so that's the arm part, and then he's got these sort of odd bits at the end which are supposed to be his hands. So maybe we can make something that looks a bit better. I'll just sort of work that out as we go along. First thing we need to do though is to take this little Huffer apart and see what we're left with, because both of these are broken slightly differently, and then we can see what we can make and how we can attach it. So Huffer is held together by one screw on the back there, and I reckon if we unscrew that we'll get to the pieces that we need, which will be his arms. So let's just unscrew that and we'll see what happens. So take that screw out there, and I reckon this back panel will come off. It does, and there are his arms. So we just put the rest of the body to one side. It looks fairly simple. I don't think we'll have any trouble working out which way this goes back together. So these are his arms, and they are held into some small pieces of plastic here by, it looks like a little clip there, which is why I've got my tweezers, because I reckon we can probably pull the remains of those arms out if we squeeze together that little clip. So if I squeeze that, there you go, and push, yeah, that's come out quite easily. So that is the arm, and you can see there that's where it's snapped off. So we've got a sort of awkwardly shaped little angle piece there that we need to attach it onto. Let's do the other arm and we'll see how that one looks. Right, there's the other arm. Yeah, and that is broken pretty much in the same way. Actually, sort of the mirror image actually. So yeah, we've got some awkward areas to attach things onto, but I think we can do something. So let's get constructing some new arms out of some old bits of styrene. Okay, so if we look at the arms, we can see we've got a sort of thicker diameter cylinder here. We've got a thinner bit in the middle, and then this end bit can be made out of some flat styrene sheet. So I've had a look in my bag of bits, and I found this sort of thickish styrene rod. I've got a slightly thinner styrene rod, and I reckon if we sort of stick these two bits together, we can make something that looks like the arm there. These aren't quite the exact diameters. In fact, that one is just a little bit thinner than the top piece, and that one is a fair amount thinner, but it will be close enough. So I'm just going to sort of go with it. I can tell you the measurements that I've got here. So this is about 6mm diameter, but let me tell you the sort of proper measurements here. So that's about 7mm for the top part and about 5mm for the bottom part. It's close enough. I can get something that looks pretty reasonable. So I need to cut some pieces of this thicker styrene rod, which is going to be, that's 11mm tall, and I can see that there's a slight taper or a little chamfer to the top of that. You can see there's a slight chamfer. So I'm going to chamfer the end of this before I cut it, and then I'll cut some 11mm pieces. And to do that, I'm just going to quickly file around the edge. It will be easier to do some of these sort of filing pieces while everything is sort of in a larger piece of plastic, because by the time you cut these small bits off, it becomes a bit awkward to do filing like this. So yeah, I'm just going to quickly sort of do a chamfer around the end of this. Then I'll cut an 11mm piece off. I'll do the same again because we need obviously to do this twice, and then we can stick them onto a bit of this smaller styrene rod, and we'll get something that will start to look like the arms. It's going to be a sort of a hit and miss process, this. I've not made these pieces before, so yeah, let's just see what happens. So let's get filing and cutting. So I've now got these two little bits of styrene rod with one end of them with a slight chamfer on it. I'm now going to attach these two pieces to some of the smaller bits of rod that I've got. So I'm going to plastic weld the chamfered end to a nice flush piece of this smaller rod, and then once that's all dry, I can chamfer this other end as well, because then there's much more sort of bits of plastic to hold. As I say, just doing small bits of sanding on small bits of plastic becomes quite awkward. So if we start joining these pieces together, we can sort of do it a lot easier. So yeah, let's just get those plastic welded together, and then we'll start sort of shaping it a bit more. But that's going to be the basis of the arm. That's the sort of the upper arm piece. This is the middle part of the arm, and then we'll have to make a hand to sort of attach slightly further down here. But I reckon that's going to work. So yeah, let's get plastic welding. So those are now firmly stuck on, and what I've got to do is add a chamfer like I've just done to this one on the left hand side, because we are trying to recreate the top part of this arm. You can see that's already not looking too bad. In fact, I'll show you the chrome one because it's a bit easier to see. That's not looking you know, too far off the original there. So I'm just going to add this chamfer to the end of this one, and as I say, it's just much easier to do once you've got a sort of a bigger piece to hold. So I can just hold that, and again I'll do the bit of sanding just around to get that chamfer in place, and then we can start trying to make a new hand.
Toy-polloi.
Those are looking pretty reasonable now. It's certainly starting to look like the original arms. I've actually just marked them here where I need to cut them as well. The measurement for that is about 1 centimetre, so I'm making the forearms about 1 centimetre long. So I'll cut those in a minute. While I was waiting for the plastic weld to dry, I've actually had to go at making some little claws, and you can see here this is my first attempt at the claw. I think that's not too bad at all. Again, this was just made from some offcuts. I've got these pieces of 3mm thick styrene sheet that I've been shaping for another project, which you'll have seen a few weeks ago, I think, by now. This is a 6mm wide strip that I've rounded the edges of, so you can see I've got sort of rounded the edges. So what I've done is I've just cut an 8mm piece of that off the end of it. So we end up with these two 8mm pieces, and when you put those together, because I've rounded the edges already, you already start to see a bit of a claw shape. So but then what I've done is I've shaped the end of it, so I've sort of sanded down the end, stuck the two pieces together and done a little bit more shaping, and turned those into that, and I think that's going to work really well. So I've got to make another one, so let me get to shaping and plastic welding. We'll make two of these claws. We'll cut the end of these poles off, and then we'll attach these on, and that should start to look like a replacement arm. So yeah, a bit more cutting and a bit more sanding, and we're starting to get actually something that looks like an arm. As you can see, these are now actually starting to look pretty much like the arms. If I hold this up next to Huffer, you can see that's not a bad sort of match. I've made it a little bit thinner. I'm actually going to be rotating this around as well. You can see here his hand sort of, well, you know, the indication of his hands going left to right. I'm going to make them go front to back. I think that will look a little bit better. So we've now got to make the piece that attaches this to the broken section on the original part of the arm. And for that we need a piece of plastic that is about 1.5 millimeters thick. I didn't have any styrene sheet that's 1.5 millimeters, so what I've done is I've actually stuck a 1 millimeter sheet to a 0.5 millimeter sheet, and then I've got this piece, and I've cut this so this is 6 millimeters wide, and that seems to match the original piece there. So what I've got to do is attach this now to the side of these arms. It has to go on the inside like that, but I need to sand this surface down so we've got a little bit of a flat surface, then I can plastic weld that onto there, and we'll do the same on the other arm, and we'll have a mirror image of arms, and then we can work out how we can attach them to these broken pieces, which is going to be a little bit awkward, and we might need to add a little bit of sort of reinforcement to it to make it a bit stronger because it's a particularly weak point. But first up, let's attach these to the arms that I've made. Now comes the really tricky part, because we've got to attach these new arms to the broken pieces here. So we've got to match where this break is, and they're different on either side. So I'm just going to have to sort of do this by eye and see if I can get it as close as possible. So I'm going to be using my plastic nippers to carefully sort of trim bits of this new piece of styrene off until I've matched the shape of this break here, and then I'm going to glue it very carefully just using a bit of super glue and a pin here. This is my pin tool, so I'll carefully put super glue exactly where I need it, get it all lined up and get it glued. And then once it's glued in place, I reckon on this side, if we turn it over, we can add a bit of reinforcement and maybe even add a thin strip along the top as well, just to give it a little bit of extra strength. Normally I would try and plastic weld something like this, but I know the plastic used here, although it does melt with plastic weld, it won't fuse to this styrene, so we're going to have to go with super glue. But I reckon we'll get a reasonably good bond. It's never going to be sort of strong enough to be played with, but it will certainly be good enough for display. You just have to be a little bit more sort of careful with it as you transform, but I think it will still actually sort of form a pretty strong bond in the end. So yeah, let's just get carefully cutting and see if I can match these two up. I've made some measurements of the other one here that I have that isn't broken, just to see how long this piece of plastic needs to be. And essentially the break on this piece here is pretty much up to the end of this thin post, so I know that I've got to cut as close as possible to my new piece here, and that should match. And then we'll just make the other one match the length on the other side, because it is broken slightly differently and slightly closer. So yeah, let's get cutting and see if we can get these to match. It's just going to be a sort of hit and miss job on this. If it goes horribly wrong and it doesn't fit, I can easily take this piece off and we'll remake it and start again. But I reckon I can probably get quite close with this. Yeah, let's just give it a go. No, I've done that horribly wrong. I've cut that too short. I knew this would happen, but that's all right. What I can do is I can take that piece off and I'll just stick this piece back on. Sometimes you make mistakes like that. Yeah, I've cut that way too short. We'll start again. With a little bit of sort of fine tuning, I've managed to get those arms glued in place. You can see I put some extra support there on the inside. I've got some 0.5mm thick styrene sheet that I've just put on that edge of it. Likewise the same on this side, and that seems to have made it fairly strong. So I thought it was a good opportunity to actually test that they all fitted. So I've very quickly just put Huffer back together so we can see that's what he looks like in vehicle mode. And I don't think they look too bad at all. Let's give him a quick transform and see what he looks like in robot mode. So we have to pull his legs down like so. We've got to rotate his head up like that, and these arms should pull out and then they rotate forwards. And those aren't too bad at all. They are pretty convincing. I'll bring in the original one. You can see there is a slight difference to them. They're a little bit thinner, but I think the overall effect is, yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I did add an extra little bit of detail on the top there. You can see I just added another small piece of styrene. This thinner rod of styrene, I just cut an extra bit of that off and stuck on top just to add a bit of detail, and I think that sort of breaks it up a little bit. So there we go. There are some new arms, but we now need to paint them. So let me take Huffer apart again, and we'll see about getting some chrome on these and making them look nice and shiny. For the chrome on these, I want to use the Mirror Stuart Semple Chrome. This I found to give a really nice finish, but to get that really nice finish you need to have a high gloss sort of coat on top of everything first. So I've just masked off some of the bits that I don't want to get the gloss spray paint on, which is the little post that goes inside the mechanism that actually sort of allows you to rotate the arm, and the wheel. I don't want the wheel to be sprayed black, although I've not masked off the inside because you won't be able to see that, and that will just be black. So I'm going to take this out into my garage and give it a coat of this gloss black spray paint. We'll let that dry, and then we can apply this, and hopefully that will give us a really nice shiny chrome finish, and they will look like Huffer's arms again. The paint has now had time to dry, and I've got a pretty good gloss finish on that, so I'm happy with how that's looking. We can now go ahead and apply the chrome finish, which, as I said, is this Stuart Semple Mirror. I find this does give a very nice chrome finish. It's quite expensive. This little bottle is about £30, but it goes a long way. You just use ever such a tiny amount each time. So I'm going to mix this up, give it a good shake, and apply it to this. Leave it for about an hour to dry, and then we should be ready to put the whole thing back together. The paint has now had time to dry, so we can just go ahead and put him back together. I've got the little blue clip here which pops over the clip part which we haven't modified. That just should push onto there. That lines up there on his body. We'll do the same with the other arm. So take that, we'll put the little clip piece back on, like so. That goes in there. And I've got the rear section here, we can just drop that onto there. Hopefully everything will line up. I've already got the screw in the correct place, like so. We'll screw him back together and see how he looks. So here we go. Here is my little G1 Huffer with handmade smokestacks and hands. I'm really very pleased with how this has turned out. I wasn't expecting them to look actually sort of quite this nice, but you can see in vehicle mode they do look like smokestacks. I have turned the claws around so they are now facing sort of front to back compared to the original ones which were sort of side to side. Let's transform him into robot mode. So to do that we have to unhook his head, rotate that round, we pull his legs down, and then his arms pull out and rotate round like that, and there we go. That is him in robot mode. I'm still, you know, not 100% sure that these arms look very good. The original ones didn't look very good, but I think the overall effect on these is pretty impressive. They work and they would look really nice on display. Let me bring in my original one so you can see him here. Look, his head is rotated down. So there we go. That is my original Huffer. I think those are a pretty reasonable sort of recreation, considering it's just made out of a few bits of sort of scrap styrene that I have to hand. That works really very well, and it wasn't a huge amount of work to do. It's taken me a couple of hours and a little bit of time waiting for some paint to dry. But yeah, that looks really good. I'm very pleased with how he has turned out. So there we go, that is it for this video, and as I mentioned at the start, I've been doing quite a few of these little sort of repair projects on vintage G1 Transformers. They are really fun to work on. Some of those videos you will have seen already on toy-polloi, but there are extra ones that I've been recording for the On the Cutting Mat series, which is an exclusive series of videos I record for my Patreons and YouTube channel members. If you want to see those, then hit the join button below this video to become a YouTube channel member, or follow the link in the video to become a Patreon. It costs as little as £1 a month, and you get early access to all my restoration videos and extra bonus content like the On the Cutting Mat series. Hopefully you have enjoyed this video. If you have, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video. And thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.